There is a problem with pour-overs that we need to address. Now, I wish I had someone like a World Brewers Cup champion, like Matt Winton on the back of this incredible paper filter packet, to help me with this. So maybe we can make a wish. I wish Matt Winton was here to help. It worked. That's good. Matt is the 2021 World Brewers Cup champion. And we have him here today to chat with us about some problems with pour-overs.
As I started to understand a little bit more about brewing, I realized that there was more to it than meets the eye. And just taking a brewer, I couldn't really fully understand what it was going to give me into the cup until I started to understand a little bit more about how the water was going to flow through the paper filter.
Sure.
And maximize, the most of the brewer itself, and then how that affected the cup. When I won the World Championship, to be honest, I didn't really know a lot about brewing. I think that I could brew a pretty good cup of coffee for competition on stage, but then once I started to explore some different types of drippers and some other styles of brewing, especially what people said online and on Instagram, where people said, you have to do a high extraction. You have to have a really high ratio. You have to use hot water. You have to get the most out of your coffee. And I started to try it with a couple of different drippers that were sort of well known on the market, that people were, I suppose, influencers were promoting, and people of note were saying that this is going to get you a great cup of coffee. And all I could taste was like a really bitter, astringent sort of cup, and I was one of those homebrewers that was disappointed. And it made me go back and look at, okay, what is going on in these drippers? What is actually happening, and how can I get the most out of these drippers and the coffees to get a result that I like? It was as simple as that. And that led me down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how drippers worked. And, that was sort of the problem with pour-overs in a way, where I had to figure it out myself.
I need you all to listen carefully. A lot of people at home get frustrated that they can't dial in their drippers, they can't get a good cup of coffee, and they think that they're kind of alone or they don't know what they're doing. You have a World Brewers Cup champion who just admitted, even after becoming best brewer in the world, he still was questioning things because he was seeing people online rave about certain products and he wasn't getting similar results. Not everything online is true, okay?
Yeah, I can empathize with you guys. Like it's really complicated, and I think that there's not a lot of information that makes it simple. So part of what I wanted to do today, and the reason that we've been trying to do this for such a long time, is to try and get something in a format that's going to be really simple for you to understand, that's going to help you get the most out of your brewers. There's the capillary flow, the different points of pressure that encourage flow through one area of a dripper or not. We won't go too far into that stuff. We'll just sum it up into a nicely neat little area of like talking about contact points. So essentially, I started trying to brew this style of really high extractions with a big ratio and high like temperature. 1 to 17, 1 to 18, 1 to 19. 1 to 20 I even saw some people saying. Yeah. And they said that you had to grind finer, and all of the things were contributing to getting a higher extraction cup. Also getting inconsistency with drawdown times, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. In the cup, some had a high extraction, but they were sort of bitter and astringent at the same time. Ended up turning to my good friend Google, and I found a blog post from Jonathan Garnier. You could cut up a piece of mesh, like a metal sieve, for example, and you can place that at the bottom of the brewer, and it'll increase consistency. Reasoning in the post was that it would prevent the paper from sagging into the holes. And I just picked that up and ran with it and started doing it and found, hey, this works. Sagging of the paper filter wasn't really an issue. So I started to try and understand this a little bit more. Reached out to some friends, reached out to you, reached out to some other people. For example, Yisin in Singapore, me and him had a lot of talks about it. Why does adding a mesh at the bottom of a flatbed brewer help get more consistency, a better taste, and faster drawdown times?
All right, so to quickly explain what we're going to show you, I have 200 mils of water. I'm going to pour it through just the filter, so no contact points. The water will not be high enough for his finger to hit it. And we're going to measure the flow rate and the amount of time it takes for about 190 mils to get out and into the decanter. Then we're going to repeat it. Same thing with a coffee flush inside of a Kono, which will be stuck completely against the walls at the top and just have a little bit of contact points at the bottom. So let's go ahead and do this.
what was actually affecting the flow through the paper filter more than sagging, more than holes, more than ribs, more than the paper filter itself, was how it was flowing. And this is the contact points. And this is the theory that I sort of want to explain a little bit more.
So if you remember, inside of a Kono, you have flat walls where the filter sticks it right against it to decrease the amount of bypass, and then the ridges at the bottom. So the ridges at the bottom is where we're going to have those contact points in order to allow for the potentially heightened flow, theoretically. And as you see, we're at 24 seconds, 182, and we're going to be at 190 in just a second here, and boom, 31.6 seconds, so about 20 seconds faster.
Wherever there's places touching, not touching, touching, not touching, this seems to be where the flow is coming through a paper filter the most. You can see it here where it's just water, and that effect is compounded even more when there's coffee and the potential for clogging or channeling.
Now we're going to rerun that, but instead of just letting water go through without anything, I'm just going to touch a spoon to the side to give it one contact point. We're going to see how that affects the speed with which the water is able to travel through the medium.
You should also see that you'll get a bit of a stream coming out the side of the spoon from that contact point. There is flow through it. So if that's just one, imagine what you can do with 10 or hundreds. If we have a paper filter that's not touching anything, we have a slower flow. So we'll call that a lower flow. It's not no flow, it's a lower flow. And let's say hypothetically we have a paper filter fully touching the walls of this S-Works brewer. Is there going to be high flow or low flow? Low flow, right? It's fully in touch, fully contacting. There's nowhere for it to flow. So if that's going to be low flow, and here at the base is also low flow, where is the water flowing? That's the big question. And the answer is the points where it's touching and then not touching. And these are the contact points. And this is going to be the key for you to understand how any dripper works. So, for example, if we take one of my favorite brewers, the Aurea, smooth walls, we'll put a flat paper filter in here, not much flow. Here at the base, we're able to see that there's parts of this which are fully in touch with the paper filter, that would be also low flow, and there's some holes. And in these holes, there's also going to be low flow. But the place where the water is actually going to be flowing is just around the sides. And that's the capillary flow that we spoke about earlier. It's touching, not touching, and touching again. That's where you see the meniscus of a glass of water, where it's just got that little bead in there. That's essentially what's happening, the water flowing through our paper filter. By understanding that the water is going to flow through more contact points, we can look at a dripper and we can start to understand it. This isn't going to be super even in terms of our drawdown through the bed. And this is where I teamed up with Sybarist for a little bit of a hashtag sponsored post. No, it's not. But we made this product called a booster. And the booster here just has hundreds of contact points, where these tiny little holes are slightly larger than the fibers of the pores of the paper filter. And we're going to have a very even extraction across this whole booster. You simply put that at the base of a brewer, and then your paper filter. Then all of a sudden at the bottom here we have these hundreds of contact points, which means that there aren't going to be channels for the water to flow through, have under extraction, over extraction. Instead, it's just going to be a very even brew. And to me, this is the solution of how understanding contact points can help you get a better brew with more even extraction. If you want higher extraction, if you want faster drawdown times, it's up to you at this point.
I'd actually designed one of these meshes with Fellow in order to help improve the efficacy of extraction through the stag. At the time, though, the whole idea that I was going after was specifically to disallow the filter from clogging up those holes, which can also happen in an Aurea when you brew, with enough heavy water. You can have the filter completely covering these bottom areas, and you don't really have a lot of surface area for the dripping, so it only really is able to release through these holes.
So you've got a specific recipe in this one?
Yeah, baby. What do you think it is? 1, 2, 1. Now for fun, we're just going to do a little side-by-side of brewing without the booster and with the booster, which of course you don't need the booster. You can use a mesh. You can do anything underneath to increase the contact points. Using the X bloom because it's automated. We don't have any human inconsistency in it. Oh, also this is a Samo bloom. So 60-degree bloom.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it looks
cold.
Yeah. This isn't a definitive test. Obviously, Matt's done lots of testing outside of this, but just for our sake now, we're gonna do back to back. We'll look at the times, we'll look at the extractions, we'll taste them, and we'll just see what the difference is. So we have the booster one here and the one without the nude one right there. Now for me immediately, this one has a much more clear presentation of the flavors. Totally. This one is a bit more, I don't want to say muddy because I think that gives off a descriptor that's not necessarily proper, but it's more blended, I guess I would say, than this one is with a bit of harshness about it that this one is absent of.
I would say it's muddy.
You would say it's muddy? I think muddy comes along with like really fine grounds, and there's a specific taste that I get with muddy. These are pretty low.
We just discovered it today and yesterday that we actually have quite a difference in opinion of our preference to brewers and to the style of brew. And so for me, this basically says that there's more ways to extract coffee depending on your preference, with the understanding of how contact points are going to affect your dripper. So Lance, for example, his conical brews, they have lots of bypass. He does brews where he fills the level up really high. And for myself, I like something with a little bit more body. I've been turning to more flatbed brewers, and particularly when I do have them with a booster and a flat paper filter. Shameless plug of the B3 that I made with Sybaris. This is like a personal preference, which also helps to give us more body in a brew with more sweetness, a nice acidity, but it's not this tea-like style. It was quite different to our preferences. But by understanding the contact points, we're able to get the most out of each brewer. And I think overall, we both had very even brews, which is kind of the whole point of this. So essentially now I've got two main ways that I'm brewing coffee. One of them I do for more clean, lighter wash coffees where I really want to push that extraction. And that's where I turn to something like the Araya with the B3 paper and the booster. And there I get a really high extraction because we've got this evenness of flow. We can sort of tweak the way that we're brewing and do high temperature, around 98 degrees. We can do a fine grind. We can do less frequent pours, but with more agitation from pouring up high, like you've shown in some of your videos. And a longer ratio, like a 1:17, 1:18 ratio. And I can still get these 1.45 brews. It extracts a lot. And then I have the other side of the coin where we have these naturals. We have advanced processes. We have coffees that maybe they're not the cleanest profile, but they have a lot of fermentation, a lot of flavor, a lot of sweetness already in there. If we try and push the extractions on these naturals, like we do with our wash coffees, we're gonna have muted flavors, we're going to have more bitterness, we're going to have less sweetness, less acidity. It's going to just be a mess. So there I do turn to a slightly lower extraction style by having this 5-pour style like I've shown in videos on Hario YouTube, like I've done at the Worlds. This range, we don't look for this 21, 22% extraction. We go back and we look at like a nice 18, 19% extraction.
In order to kind of emulate his higher extraction types of brews, you must have a capable grinder. If you're emulating something random and you don't have a great grinder, the coarser you can go, the better the brew's gonna be. That's just how it's gonna go with cheaper grinders or with grinders that might not have as unimodal of a particle distribution. But anyway, definitely try out some of these, especially if you have grinders that are capable. And even if you don't, give it a try and maybe you like it, who knows? Play around with contact points, see if you have different drippers and see how you can manipulate your extraction in order to take into account this kind of maybe new understanding of how water flows through. And if it's not new, great. But anyway, thank you so much, Matt, for coming by.
My pleasure.
It was a lovely time. And as always, I hope that you all brew something tasty today. And cheers.
Cheers.